Elena Ramirez's hands
Don't let them sedate me
trembled
again.
as she clutched the
Don't let
folded
them
note
silence the
she
truth.
found, slipped beneath the chart on her desk, the cheap paper feeling as heavy and damning as a tombstone in her palm. Don't let them sedate me again. If I don't make it through tonight, please open the box under my bed. David. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum beat in the oppressive silence of the hospital's third floor. She looked down the dimly lit hallway of St. Augustine's Hospital, a long, sterile corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, each door a silent witness, each flickering fluorescent light a nervous tick. It was nearly 1 a.m., the witching hour when the world held its breath, and the words were quiet except for the steady, rhythmic hum of ventilators and the soft, almost apologetic squeak of her own rubber-soled shoes on the polished linoleum. The air was thick with the cloying smell of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet, the scent of managed decay. Elena swallowed hard, the lump in her throat feeling like a shard of glass. She had been working here for only 8 months, a mere 240 days of trying to be invisible and invaluable at the same time, still proving herself, still desperately trying to be the reliable, professional nurse everyone expected, the one who didn't ask too many questions, who chatted meticulously and never rocked the boat. At 22, fresh out of nursing school with a mountain of student debt and a family back home who saw her as their salvation, she wasn't supposed to be wrapped up in clandestine secrets and whispered warnings. She was supposed to be changing IV bags, fluffing pillows, and offering reassuring smiles. But something about David Caldwell, the 28-year-old patient, in room 9 with the haunted eyes and the chart that read like a death sentence had unsettled her from the very first night he was admitted, a quiet tremor of wrongness that had grown into a full-blown earthquake. Officially, he was here for advanced congestive heart failure, a diagnosis that was both tragically common and clinically straightforward. At least, that's what the thick manila folder said, what Dr. Milton repeated during rounds with a practiced, somber tone. But nothing about David fit the image of a man quietly, passively dying. His body might have been failing, but his mind was a razor's edge. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were sharp and appraising, missing nothing. His voice, though often weak, was always steady, and his questions about the staff, about shift changes, about the location of security cameras were far too precise, too analytical for a typical patient succumbing to fate. Miss Ramirez, David had said just 3 days earlier, his gaze not on her face but lingering on her name badge, as if committing it to memory for a purpose she couldn't fathom. You're new here. That makes you safer. Less compromised. She hadn't known what he meant then, had dismissed it as the rambling of a man on heavy medication, but his words had echoed in her mind during the long, lonely hours of her shifts. Now, reading the note, feeling the desperate urgency in the scrawled handwriting, the truth was starting to claw at her, a terrifying, formless beast emerging from the shadows of her denial. She slipped the crinkled paper into her pocket, the corner of it jabbing into her thigh like a guilty secret, and forced her legs to move, to carry her down the hall, past the sleeping forms in other rooms, toward the source of her fear. She pushed open the door to room 9, the soft click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. David was sitting upright in bed, a gaunt silhouette illuminated by the cold, sterile moonlight streaming through the blinds, casting stripes of light and shadow across his pale face. Even with the ivy line taped cruelly to his forearm, a tether to this place he so feared, he looked more like a soldier preparing for a final, hopeless battle than a patient on the edge of death. You found it, he said softly, his voice a dry rasp that carried both profound exhaustion and a flicker of desperate relief. Elena closed the door behind her, leaning back against it, her own body a flimsy barrier against the world outside. What's going on, David? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the frantic thumping in her ears. Why are you so afraid of sedation? It's supposed to help you rest. His eyes, sunken but burning with intensity, locked on hers. Because it's not sedation, Elena. It's not medicine. They're not treating me, they're silencing me. A chill, colder than the hospital's overzealous air conditioning, ran down her spine, raising goosebumps on her arms. This was no longer the realm of medical procedure. This was something dark, something predatory. Open the box, he urged, his gaze flicking to the space beneath the bed. You need to see for yourself. You need to understand. Elena hesitated, a war raging within her. Every instinct, every rule drilled into her during her training screamed at her to walk away, to report this to her charge nurse, to dismiss it as patient paranoia. But the look in Davy's eyes, the sheer, unadulterated terror mingled with a plea for belief, held her captive. She bent down, her starched uniform crinkling, and her fingers brushed against the cold, unyielding surface of a small metal case. She pulled it out. It was a simple document box, the kind you might use for important papers, secured with a flimsy latch. Her hands, still trembling, fumbled with it before it flicked open with a soft metallic click. She gasped a sharp, involuntary intake of breath. Inside, bathed in the pale moonlight, was a meticulously organized nightmare. There were photographs of people, smiling, vibrant, full of life, clipped to patient records with dates of admission and, chillingly, dates of death that followed soon after. There were internal memos, toxicology reports with redacted sections, and what looked like vials of unmarked, murky medication, their stoppers sealed with plain, anonymous rubber. One thick folder, bound with a rubber band, was labeled simply Try Group C. What is this? She asked, her voice cracking, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the file. The truth, David said grimly, a single tear tracing a path down his hollow cheek. The truth that St. Augustine's isn't just treating patients, they are using them, they are experimenting on them. These are illegal drug trials sponsored by a pharmaceutical company that pays this hospital a fortune to look the other way. The patients in that folder, they're like me, admitted for one thing but dying from another. Most of them are vulnerable, without family to ask the hard questions. They don't survive long enough to figure it out. Elena's mind reeled, a chaotic storm of disbelief and horror. She wanted to believe this was a delusion, a symptom of his illness, the fever dream of a man under immense physical and psychological stress. But the document in her hands felt too real, the cold, hard weight of them an undeniable anchor to this monstrous reality. The official letterheads, the doctor's signatures she recognized, the sheer volume of organized data. It was too detailed, too methodical to be the product of a paranoid mind. And you? She whispered, looking from the files to his face. How do you know all this? He let out a ragged, broken sigh. I used to work for them, he confessed, his voice breaking with a shame so profound it seemed to physically pain him. I was a medical researcher for the company funding this. Vexalor Pharmaceuticals, I helped design the protocol for this very drug. It was supposed to be a revolutionary cardiogenic agent, but the initial lab results were unstable, unpredictable. When I found out they were moving to human trials without FDA approval, using this hospital as their secret testing ground, I refused to be a part of it. I threatened to go to the authorities. His gaze fell to the IV in his arm, so they made me a patient. My own colleagues, people I trusted, they found a way to induce heart failure symptoms in me with a slow acting cardiotoxin. They admitted me here under their care, ensuring that when I started telling my story, no one would believe me. I'd just be another dying man, delusional and desperate. Her throat went dry. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity: his analytical questions, his distrust of the staff, his fear of the very medicine meant to save him. Why me? She asked the question a raw, desperate plea. Why are you telling me? Because you're the only one who still looks at me like I'm a human being, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Everyone else sees a file number, a set of symptoms on a chart. Dr. Milton, the nurses who have been here for years, they see a problem to be managed, but you still have that light in your eyes, that compassion. You haven't been compromised yet. If I don't survive tonight, Elena, you're the only chance this evidence has of ever seeing the light of day. Suddenly, the faint squeak of shoes echoed in the hall, firmer, more purposeful than her own. A shadow slipped beneath the doorframe, a dark, elongated shape that seemed to suck the air from the room. Hide the box, David hissed, his eyes wide with primal fear. Now, with a surge of adrenaline, Elena shoved the metal case under her loose fitting cardigan, hugging it to her stomach as if shielding a child. The cold metal pressed against her skin just as the door creaked open. Dr. Milton, the senior physician on duty, a man with a patrician air and eyes as cold as a mug slab, stepped in. His smile was a thin, tight slash across his face, a rehearsed gesture that never reached his eyes. Evening, Nurse Ramirez. Just doing my final rounds. How's our patient doing? Elena forced her own muscles to form a calm expression, praying the tremor in her hands wasn't visible. It's stable, doctor. Just don't let them silence the truth. Tears streamed down her face, but they were no longer tears of fear or grief alone. Doctors, nurses, patients, and strangers from across the country who had followed the story had cried when they heard the full truth. They cried not just because it was a tragedy, but because it reminded them of something so rare and so vital in a world filled with fear and apathy: the extraordinary power of courage. David Caldwell had died a patient, a number on a chart, a victim, but thanks to the young nurse who refused to look away, he would always be remembered as a hero. And she, Elena Ramirez, the woman who risked everything for a whispered promise in a darkened room, would carry his last wish, his legacy, and the heavy, sacred weight of his truth in her heart forever. A constant reminder that sometimes the most heroic act is simply to listen and to believe. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful African folk tales filled with wisdom and life lessons, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. Your support helps keep these timeless tales alive. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.